Even though formal colonial rule has ended in many countries, its legacies are still visible today. But colonial rule didn't just reshape the physical landscape, it ingrained its own power and knowledge relations. Colonialism built a system around three things: the idea of racial hierarchies, capitalism, and Eurocentrism, the belief that European ways of knowing and living are universal standards. The system created during colonialism never really disappeared. The same factors still shape modern society and what knowledge is valued. This is what Keanu calls the coloniality of power. In other words, the political system of colonialism may have ended, but the structures of power it created are still with us. Coloniality of power is not synonymous with colonialism or neocolonialism. Colonialism is direct political, social, and cultural domination. Neocolonialism is when countries' economic and political systems are directed from other countries, whereas the features of coloniality are very much embedded within internal, long-standing patterns of power that emerged as a result of colonialism. To properly understand how the coloniality of power manifests itself, we are going to use it as a framework to see where it appears in the 2015 documentary La Buena Vida, concerning both land and modernity. La Buena Vida follows the Wayuu community of Tamajito, Colombia. The film shows their dispossession and subsequent relocation following the expansion of one of the world's largest coal mines. It reveals how these colonial structures continue. Indigenous communities are displaced, their land enclosed for capital extraction, and a substitute way of life is offered back to them, framed as improved and developed. One of the central structures to coloniality is capitalism, not simply as an economic system, but as a system of power that reorganizes land, labor, and social life around extraction and profit. Capitalist expansion depends on a recurring process, known as the enclosure of the commons, the privatization of collectively used land and resources. Communities are stripped of their means to sustain themselves independently and pushed instead towards market dependency and waged labor. This is the driving force behind the Wayuu's displacement. The land around Tamajito isn't privately owned in the Western legal sense, it's shared, used collectively, managed across generations. The film repeatedly shows that what is being destroyed is not only territory but a system of subsistence and self-sufficiency. Backed by the Colombian government, the coal company's expansion requires not only the coal beneath the land but the destruction of the commons above it. Enclosure is enacted through the state, but more precisely through law. Behandar argues that colonial property law did not simply regulate ownership, it defined who counted as a legitimate political subject in the first place. Communities without Western legal titles were treated as pre-modern, and their land as underutilized and available for extraction. The consequences of this process become visible after relocation. While the coal company promises development and modern infrastructure, residents struggle with water scarcity, crops fail, and communities lose the ecological conditions that once allowed them to sustain themselves outside of the market. But being labelled pre-modern doesn't just justify taking the land, it justifies what comes next. Modernity defines itself against another, to project everything Europe claimed to have outgrown and left behind. Consequently, European ways of living, working, and knowledge are treated as universal standards of progress, while indigenous forms of life are racialized and temporalized as underdeveloped or stuck in the past. In La Buena Vida, the coal company repeatedly speaks the language of development and modernization. The company sees the relocation not as displacement but as an opportunity and as an improvement from indigenous ways of life. Whilst explaining the relocation, the coal company present the Wayuu community with a dream board of their future village, promising that this new phase of your lives will be much nicer, and offering to bring in experts to develop local crafts and to help sell these products in Medellin or Bogota. The language used assumes the Wayuu's lifestyle needs to be modernized and integrated into the market. Corporate expertise is positioned to override indigenous knowledge. Their existing relationship to land and self-sufficiency is treated as inadequate to capitalist development. La Buena Vida demonstrates that colonialism doesn't just live in the past. Through property law, extraction, and the language of development, indigenous land and knowledge continue to be displaced in the name of progress. The coal heating European homes, the legal frameworks dispossessing indigenous communities, and the development discourse reframing displacement as improvement, these are not separate issues, they are race, capitalism, and Eurocentrism, still operating together exactly as Keanu described. The film exposes how the legacies of colonialism survive beyond independence through knowledge and power.